Hello, everyone. I'm James Reidner, and I decided to get out the 4-track and do an audio recording. Normally, I go on Facebook and post my thoughts on Bible prophecy, Torah, politics occasionally, things like that. And the topic I wanted to get into here is a little bit too in depth for the typical Facebook post I would write, so that's why I decided to go to audio. So bear with me. This is the first time I've done this. I'm working with primitive equipment. No fancy cameras, no fancy microphones, so we'll see how this goes. But what I wanted to talk about was, I guess a few weeks ago I went out to Ohio to Enduring Hope Assembly of Yahweh, and I had the opportunity to sit with Elder Solomon Meyer, and we discussed, we did a streaming kind of thing, talking about Bible prophecy, just kind of throwing out some thoughts and comments and questions. And I mentioned something in that, and I didn't really get a chance to expound on it the way I kind of wanted to, and I thought about it later that it would be good to put something together to kind of get more in depth on it. So that's what I'm doing here. And that topic is, what is the beast? What does the beast look like as we define its appearance from the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation? And I know that there's lots of theories on what this means, who the beasts are, what they do. I'm going to go over some of that kind of for background to start, and then I'm going to suggest what I think is the correct interpretation of these beasts. I'm not going to try to identify them. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, well, this one is Obama, this one's Trump. I'm not going to play that game. I don't know that we'll actually know who is who until we actually see the things unfold. But I want to get us kind of on the right track as far as having the information in our minds that we need, having the picture kind of ready to go to where we can recognize it when we see it. So that's my purpose here. I'm going to start in Daniel chapter 2, and this is the famous vision that Nebuchadnezzar had of the statue. I'm going to start in verse 31, and this is where Daniel comes in and he's actually talking to the king. He says, "You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of that statue was made of fine gold, its chest and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time, and became chaff, like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." So starting with that one, I want to unpack what most people consider to be the interpretation of that. And I'm reading from a Zondervan Thin Line New American Standard Bible, and all throughout here they put little helpful notes, beginning of chapters, sections, pericopes that kind of explain where you're at, so you can go right and see which topic you're looking for at just a glance. I love this system. I highly recommend this Bible if you're looking for a new one. But the way this one is, it's a little bit misleading. And I get to verse 36, and I have a little thing that says, "The interpretation, Babylon, the first kingdom." I go a little further, and I see Medo-Persia and Greece. I see Rome. But the problem is, we don't see any of that in the text. So I'll keep reading and show you what I mean. Starting in verse 36. "This was the dream. Now we will tell you its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, to whom the Elohim of heaven was given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand and has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold." He doesn't say Babylon is the head of gold. He's speaking directly to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold. Verse 39. "After you there will arise another kingdom inferior to you, then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. Now there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So, like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom. but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So at this point, it's worth it to take a look at the current prevailing view of what this means. And the best I can tell, this tracks back to Hal Lindsey, most of it in Late Great Planet Earth. Maybe it goes back further than that, but the typical dispensationalist view of how to interpret this, I'm pretty sure goes to there. And the basic gist of it is the head, it was Babylon, ancient Babylon, just like my Zondervan says, the next kingdom, the chest of silver, that was Greece. I'm sorry, Medo-Persia. And then as you get into the belly of bronze, that was Greece. And then as you get into the legs of iron and the feet of clay, that was Rome. And so, as I said earlier, it never actually says that. We see later in the book of Daniel that Daniel was aware of the Medo-Persian Empire. He was aware of the Greek Empire. He calls them by name. He could have just as easily specified that in this interpretation, and yet he didn't. But that's the prevailing view. And so that leaves us with kind of a problem in my mind, because if we're going to say that the fourth kingdom is Rome, then we have two options. We have the preterist option, to where this was fulfilled in 70 AD. This was Rome. Rome destroyed Jerusalem. Rome was the beast, and that's over and done. I don't personally believe that. The second option is, if we're going to insist that this is Rome, we have to bring Rome back, because Rome hasn't been a significant power since going back to like around the 3rd century, maybe 4th century, Constantine era. The Roman Empire fizzled. It transitioned into the Holy Roman Empire in the 600s and 700s, and then it, ran its course, and Napoleon came along and did away with it, and then it was kind of transitioned over to the Vatican, I think in 1926, something like that. And so it's not the Roman Empire. It's not what it was under Julius Caesar, under Augustus, under Octavius, all the different emperors. It's not Rome. It's not the Rome that would have been referred to here. So in order to make that work, we have to bring it back. We have to have a revived Roman Empire. And this is where Hal Lindsey comes in. He was a big proponent of the EU, I guess it was the European Commercial Zone, something like that, back when it was first commissioned, and it was going to have like 10 nations. So there's your 10 toes. And that must be it. And so now the EU has more than 10 nations. It hasn't done these things that we're talking about here, but lots of people are still holding out hope that the EU is going to be the revived Roman Empire. They're going to get an army together at some point where they can actually wage war and enforce their will on the nations around them, all these different things. But I just don't see it, guys. I just don't see it. And we'll get into more of that later. Continuing in verse 44. In the days of those kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great Elohim has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. And I'm going to grab a few phrases going back to the beginning of what we started reading. First, in verse 31, you were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. We have one unified statue, a single object. All of these different kingdoms are part of this single statue. We get a little further down, and verse 35. Verse 34. You continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Okay, so the feet of iron and clay are destroyed first by this stone. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time, and became chaff from the summer threshing floors. So, if we're going to say that there's a revived Roman Empire that's going to be destroyed when this mountain, this stone comes, which is clearly the Messiah, then we have to also logically make the assumption that we're going to have a revived Babylonian Empire, a revived Medo-Persian Empire, a revived Greek Empire, because they all have to coexist at the same time at Messiah's coming to be destroyed in the manner depicted here. And we go a little bit further down in verse 44, kind of reinforces that. In the days of those kings, plural, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. It's going to put an end to all these kingdoms, not just the fourth one. So again, we have clear reference to these four kingdoms coexisting at the end of the age upon Messiah's return. So how are we going to deal with that? We're going to have to bring back all four. We're going to revive all four of these. I just don't see it. I don't see it in the text. I don't see it in current events. It's not there. So to continue, we'll go to Daniel 7. This is a parallel vision that Daniel was given of these four kingdoms. And I'll just start reading in verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Keep that part in mind for later in this. And the four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled up by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. So it's easy to see with this 4th beast the connection to the 4th kingdom that we read about in Nebuchadnezzar's statue in Daniel chapter 2. We have that same number 10. We had 10 toes, and now we have 10 horns. There's talk about it crushing with its feet, trampling down. So it's very similar. I'm pretty sure everybody agrees we're talking about the same beast here. And if that's the case, then we could logically assume that these other 3 beasts that precede it correspond with the other 3 kingdoms in Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So we'll keep reading here. Verse 9. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames, and its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. That's interesting to me, because clearly he's talking about when the beast is slain. That's the one he previously referenced. That's the 4th beast. But he goes on to say that the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. So these beasts, these kingdoms that they represented, they no longer have power, but they're still around after the 4th beast is destroyed. So are we going to say that a revived Roman Empire is destroyed, but Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece all have their dominion taken away at that point and have I guess, a people left behind. Again, we've got to bring those back too. We've got to have all four of these coexisting at the same time, and I don't see it. Verse 13, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the nations, peoples, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. And then so, starting in verse 15, Daniel gets the exact interpretation of this. I'm going to come right down to verse 23. And let's see, is that where I want to start? I'll just start in verse 19 for context. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely, that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints, and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and tread it down, and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High, and wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. Hallelujah. May we see that in our lifetimes. So it's clear here that we have, again, these 4 kingdoms coexisting at the end of the age. So at this point, we're going to go into Revelation 13. I want you to remember some things we read there, the beast coming out of the sea, that type of language. Remember the descriptions of these beasts. We've got a lion, a bear, a leopard. They've got multiple heads, multiple horns, multiple wings. So we'll go into Revelation 13. I won't belabor this too much. I just want to make the connection here, and then you're smart enough to where you can kind of see the rest from there. I don't have to spoon feed it. It makes it pretty clear once we kind of see the dots connected. Revelation chapter 13. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. We read about that in Daniel 7. That's a reference we find prophetically to people, like the nations in general, like a sea of people, sea of humanity, like we hear about in modern terms. Having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 crowns, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So hit the pause button there and go back to this. Back it up here. And if we go back to Daniel 7, where we were just at earlier, let's take note of the numbers of the heads and horns here. Okay, so we'll start off with the heads. Our lion has 1 head. Our bear has 1 head. When we get to the leopard has 4 heads. Okay, so now we've got 6 heads total. And the 4th beast has 1 head. So we have 7 heads total between these 4 beasts in Daniel 7. Big surprise when we get to Revelation 13 and we see our beast has 7 heads. Now let's take a look at the horns. This is easy. We see 10 horns on this beast in Revelation 13. 4th beast in Revelation 7 has 10 horns. So that's all accounted for. And then not to mention the description of this beast in Revelation 13 is a conglomerate. It's a putting together of the beast in 7. So Daniel 7. So clearly, again, we have reference to these four kingdoms coexisting at the same time. And Revelation 13 seems to imply that they're working in some kind of unison because it's calling them one beast. Where I don't know is, are we talking about just like an alliance of some sort, or has this fourth beast actually conquered and absorbed these other three kingdoms in some way to make this unified, monstrous fourth beast? That I don't know. I think that will be revealed to us at a later time, though, Yahweh willing. And we just have to have our eyes open to see it. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with this. I hope that that's clear enough to kind of dispel this whole revived Roman Empire thing. I know for a fact that I'm not the first one to put this together. There are different YouTube videos that talk about it. But I just felt like I had to kind of get into it and kind of clarify it for anyone that I know that might be interested. I'll find some medium to put this up, maybe SoundCloud, I don't know, and get it out there for anyone that might want to look into this. But anytime we see, oh, there's a revived Roman Empire, it's the UN, it's the EU, it's America, whatever the case may be, I I really think that's just smoke and mirrors. It's being done deceptively to throw us off from what's right before us. And I mean, keep in mind, Yahshua said that the deception that's coming in the last days is going to be so massive and so well done that even the elect might be deceived. So, in my mind, if we have a majority of believers sharing a generally common view of how the end times are going to shake down, that's probably incorrect. They might have some truth in it, but the overall picture is going to be skewed. Um, so just something to kind of keep in mind as you study your Bible prophecy. If you're a serious student of end times eschatology, as I am, we just have to make sure that we're interpreting things as the actual text displays and interprets them, and we're not relying on theologians, seminary graduates, self-proclaimed prophets, whatever the case may be, to tell us what it says. It's fairly common sense. So I'll leave it with that, and may Yahweh bless you. May Yahshua the Son walk with you in everything that you do. May the Holy Spirit give you wisdom and guidance as you study through this. Hallelujah.